how do you think we can break that stigma around civilians in general to talk about mental health?
Right. So I don't believe in stigma-busting initiatives. So I'm starting by answering your question by saying what I think doesn't work. So what doesn't work in society or organizations or university campuses or companies is a CEO, a chancellor of a university who says, let's bust down stigma for our students. We're going to put out posters. We're going to have a Bell Let's Talk Day. We're going to, have a little mental health day. Bravo, mental health for one day. Because what happens in those events is everybody gives a about mental health for that day. Oh, mental health. And then everybody goes back to after that. Not deliberate, but it's essentially, bother me, because an event doesn't change behavior. An event doesn't change culture. A poster doesn't do that. So the way to change culture is to actually engage people in co-creating the culture-changing solution. Nobody does that. And I can point you to a community-based rehabilitation, CBR. You can Google it, World Health Organization. Now you're going to say, I Googled it, Stéphane, and you're stretching. Well, here's why I think I'm not stretching. What the World Health Organization essentially says, when you read between the lines of the community-based rehabilitation approach, is when you have a complex problem in an ecosystem of human beings, come flying in with a fancy suit, a briefcase, a plane ticket, and a pre-stamped solution will not work. Think of people who are trying to solve all sorts of problems in Africa or third world countries where they fly in NGOs. The problem never gets resolved. A Band-Aid is put on this, right? When the NGO leaves, people don't drink anymore. Why? Because rare are the sustainable solutions, right? The best example of this is during the AIDS crisis. During the AIDS crisis, fancy researchers and rich people said, we're going to solve the AIDS crisis. We're going to flood Africa with antiretroviral drugs, right? So they flew in there. They started giving everybody antiretroviral drugs to find out that the number one concern of AIDS victims in Africa was malnourishment. Now, you're going to say, what does malnourishment have to do with AIDS and antiretroviral drugs? Here's the connection, guys, is that only after injecting antiretroviral drugs to thousands, if not millions of people, did the researchers realize, oh my God, these drugs don't function well unless the body is well nourished, right? Because the body is weakened because of malnourishment. If they had only listened to the people impacted by AIDS to say, what is your number one concern? And they said, food? Okay, let's give you food. They would have not wasted millions, if not billions of dollars of wasted drugs. When it comes to culture and changing culture in an ecosystem like a university campus, you have to spend, and this is what we do in my company, we engage employees. We kind of know that eventually we're going to come in with the antiretroviral drug. We know that that's definitely something we need to do, right? So we do other things. We don't do the drug, but we do other things. But before we impose anything, we listen. And we let the participants impacted by the stigma educate us, the so-called experts, on what they think is going to work. Then we create the recipe for culture change and stigma reduction, and we implement that. So everything you hear, when you hear somebody saying, we just launched an anti-stigma campaign, go, that ain't gonna work, unless you spoke and you engaged with the people who are impacted by the problem. And so, long story here, but busting down stigma is definitely a goal, but it cannot be achieved by launching a stigma reduction campaign necessarily, if that makes any sense.